The Reef Beef podcast is designed to mimic what it's like to have reef keepers talking to each other after a trade show floor is closed for the day. So imagine that Ben and I have not seen each other in a year, and we've gone to a trade show in some far off land, and now we're talking to each other at the end of the day. We may be talking with bad language, we may be talking without bad language, but we're talking much freer than we would if this was some kind of article. So just know that. That's our goal. That's Reef Beef. And here we go. My name is Rich.
And my name is Benjamin.
And today on Reef Beef, we're going to be talking about a new ICP article. We're going to answer some questions for some beefers, really good topics. And who knows what else we'll get to. So welcome to the show. This is Reef Beef.
This show is brought to you by saltwateraquarium.com. It is powered by PolypLab, and it's also brought to you by Champion Lighting Supply.
And what I really meant to say now is this is Reef Beef. How are you doing, Ben?
Well, Richard, since I saw you last, my little sickness morphed into something much more serious.
What's that?
Well, I got squirrel fingers.
Squirrel fingers and a cool lid?
Yeah. But the doctor's working on amputation situations.
Okay. You could probably have your giant son do that for you.
Probably. He'll just rip them off.
Oh my God, stop feeding that kid.
Squirrel fingers. He's giant. My kid's giant. He's 7 years old and he weighs 85 pounds and he's 4'7".
That's you. Do you live near a nuclear plant, or was there?
We make him drink ditch water.
Ditch water. Houston ditch water, which has everything ever made by man in it.
Everything you could a growing boy desires.
I'm still a little sick.
Get rid of it. Get rid of it, Richard. Get rid of that evil.
But I'm better. I'm definitely on the mend.
Awesome.
I spent 5 hours in my reef yesterday.
Wow, 5 hours.
5 hours. It's as our friend Dwayne Ostrich says, hack it back. So
oh yeah, he's a hacker.
He's more of a hacker than I am, but it was like I need to dip stuff and it's overgrown, and there was 5 inches of dead acro under the live acro, and it was just it was starting to be hard to look into it and see what was going on. And so I made some more real estate on the left-hand side, and I dipped a lot of stuff. Big chunks come out and I dip it, and I'm going to be more aggressive with that over the next couple of months, because some corals that have no visible signs of acro-eating flatworms had acro-eating flatworms. It was like, whoa, what is that about? But really kind of no signs of them. So it's like, I don't understand really what's going on. There was one coral that definitely had signs and had some on there. But now that I've got a process of how to dip, which I'll try to make a video of, there's like 3 videos I need to make to show you on the show. It makes it a lot easier. So I'll go over that later. But anyway, it looks better. Stuff will grow in again. It was time to hack a lot of stuff out. I have to do the the right side eventually, but it did end up taking about 5 hours because it was just, you can't go fast. And I think, if I had a realization to say to people, or to talk about reef keeping this week, it's, sometimes stuff takes time. We've been talking about though, with algae and stuff, and just, stuff takes time. I tend to not want to do any work. I want it to be finished immediately, but the dishes are never done. And I'm really enjoying what I did, and that knowing in 6 months, I'm going to have to do it again. It's kind of great. And it looks really nice. And I added some fish, and I like it a lot. I think it looks pretty great. I got to do a couple of tweaks. I got some awful stuff in the tip of this thumb that I hacked up this morning to try to get it out because I wasn't paying attention. The funniest thing with yesterday though was at 4.5 hours, I was like cleaning up and putting it back together. I had the flow off pretty much for the whole time. Tank only dropped 2 degrees, so not a big deal. even though
Yeah.
that did make the mini brittle starts spawn.
Uh,
But I put all the lock line back in place and I flip the pumps back on, and it's just squirting from the side of the lock line, it's peeing from the side.
yeah.
It's like, I didn't want to deal with this. Get this done. And I went, calm the hell down, Rich. This is not a big deal. It will take whatever time it takes. And so I replaced the lock line, fired the pumps back again, leaked in another place,
They
shut it
get,
all.
you notice they get cracks on those knuckles.
Yeah, that's why I have
Ah,
a bunch of extra parts laying around for stuff like that.
I thought that
And
was a lock line whip.
it is. I wanted to, yeah. Anyway, lock line is great for all kinds of stuff. But yeah, they crack, they break down, whether it's the UV or just the crappy, they're made of not great plastic.
Mhm.
But I usually inspect them for leaks before something happens. There was nothing, but when I moved and the salt creep changed or whatever, I had 2 spots. So that was a little frustrating to have to go through and pop them off. And even worse, I have this wrench, right?
I do
This
too.
because on the bigger lock line, especially at weird angles, this gives you all the leverage you need to pop the pieces together.
Gosh,
It's
sometimes popping them is just, ugh.
so hard. It doesn't work on an installed threaded fitting. They've got a threaded fitting on the lock
Yeah.
line. You can't get this around the threaded part.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Guess I never
So,
had to try to do that.
yeah, it's because it's right next to the PVC, so you really
Oh,
can't
yeah.
get it around. So that was annoying. So I had to unscrew the whole thing and put it back together and screw it back in. But the point is, what's my point? And this may be just for me, although I'm sure there are reefers who are like, God damn it, get it done. It's like, dude, just enjoy the process of your dude and dudettes. I guess, yeah, I wish dude was I think it is all gender, but I
It's
want
like
to stop
saying
saying,
guys, like,
yeah, I don't want to say guys either.
yeah,
Folks,
people.
reef peeps,
Yeah.
peeps. I sound like an idiot. It's still a little dark. It's all of it can be joy in your head. So don't get wrapped up in things being annoying. Um, it should be fun. And
Well, isn't
so
it like the Zen and whatever of motorcycle maintenance? Like, I mean, obviously people get into the hobby for different reasons. And, like we always say, like people didn't sign up to become a plumber, an electrician, a biologist. But I mean, the deeper you go in the hobby, you sort of need to find joy, some sort of joy in all the different functions to even appreciate it as a hobby.
yeah, and like we were talking some episodes, we talk about it all the time. Not all the time, but we've talked about it before. The longer you're in the hobby, you go through, it's like a Dunning-Kruger
Mhm.
graph, but it's not Dunning-Kruger. It's excitement or investment or,
Johnson Ross.
you're doing all kinds right. The Johnson Ross graph. Oh, let's make that graph. I'll make that and we'll put it on here. The Johnson Ross graph of reef excitement.
Yes.
You get really excited and you do everything too much. And then you start doing less and less. And then you see how little you can do.
Yeah.
And then you start to climb back to, oh, wait, actually, the process is more fun than the product. And if you're not enjoying the process, this is a stupid product to be making because you've got to be on top of stuff. You got to be looking stuff. Oh, the other thing I did was I was killing pests in the tank yesterday. Lots of Mahanos to take care of and stuff like that. And I just took my time and enjoyed it and didn't get too, wasted. I'm a little gargly today because I pushed too hard, but I'm not as sick as I was. So enjoy all the processes you're going through. You know,
I know what you're talking about. Like when I'm doing an install, for me, I call it being in the moment because sometimes I'm doing plumbing and it's like, I need to get this done and I need to, and my mind will wander and I tell myself like, stay focused on what you're doing. I'm not like, oh man, I got to go to my son's baseball game or I'm hungry or just stay in the moment of what you're doing.
yeah. And even because I want things done immediately. That's like my MO, and it's not healthy. So don't be like me in that respect. But I'm getting better at it. Thinking about the crazy new ideas I have for the display and an additional display. and even for, what I'm going to do for spawning this year, it's like, take your time. The new stuff that might take me 2 to 3 years to get it all done, or to get, to even get it started. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, that's kind of fun on its own, figuring it out. Yeah. So just realize that you don't have a hobby where you just put stuff in a tank and you're done. This
Finished.
is this
Yeah.
this isn't a goldfish tank,
It's constant toil.
constant toil, and your shit's gonna grow. And when your shit grows, you gotta do something to it.
And there's no
So
final answer for anything.
there is no final answer for any of it. So it's absolutely true and crazy that you need to enjoy it. And if you're not enjoying it,
What are you doing?
get a go-kart, you
Yeah.
know, you know, which you don't have to enjoy the same way. You don't have to do a go-kart where you break apart the engine yourself. You can take your go-kart somewhere else and have someone fix it for you, or your motorcycle or whatever, right? You can just ride it.
But wait, let's examine that. Like,
Okay.
because doing reef tanks as a hobby, I don't I mean, I know I feel like we all know this watching or listening to this, but like reef tank is one of those hobbies where like if you don't know how to take your engine apart on your go-kart and put it back together, you're going to be in a little bit of trouble. It's
I think
involved.
that's right. There's many facets to the reef hobby. It is not plug and play. Which why, sometimes, watching the advertising around the industry makes me a little crazy. And, this is why people get out of the hobby in 18 months, because they're sold on this idea that anyone can do it then, and it's easy. And it's not. There's a lot going on. And as you go through your Ross Johnson arc of excitement, that changes over time.
I like this. It's not like Dunning-Kruger. It's not tied to knowledge or self-estimation. The Johnson Ross graph is about like, aquarium toil and interest.
Yeah, Johnson Ross is better than Ross Johnson, I think.
Yeah.
But we'll put both. We'll put it on both. I'm just writing that down.
Yeah.
Make that graph.
That's the trick, I guess, to say a short minor thing is that stores or marketing materials from companies want you to think this is like a laissez-faire hobby you can like traipse into and traipse out of. But I'm just saying, on these higher ends, if you really want these results that you see pictures on the internet, it's a very involved hobby.
Yeah.
And it's just not. It's
and
just not laissez-faire.
It's not.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious.
Saltwateraquarium.com. Saltwateraquarium.com. Yeah.
Saltwater. Yeah. Saltwateraquarium.com has been a favorite of Rich and Ben since before this podcast existed. They've got a huge selection of everything you need, and they've got great shipping. So if you need stuff fast, they have 3 shipping centers. So stuff, if I order at 11 o'clock, it shows up at my house 2 days later, and they ship it by 1 o'clock the same day. They make life easier. What have you got there, Ben? How is that making life easier? What is that?
It is the app. You can sit in your underwear and you can order whatever you need for your saltwater aquariums on this app, and it's super easy.
It is super easy. They've also got all kinds of ways that you can get questions answered. So if you've got a question about a product, you can text them and they'll get back to you. And they're pretty fun to hang out with at a trade show. So saltwateraquarium.com, please click the link down below. And if you order from them, put something in the notes that says Reef Beef.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious.
That ties into a topic we're going to talk about, but I want to catch up with what happened with you since we last talked. What stories from your trenches do you have, if you do have any?
So at first you're going to roll your eyes, but I've been, well, not necessarily, but I've been paying a little more attention to pH, because I've had, a vast marine kalkwasser stirrers on several systems for many, many years. And I sometimes get a little lazy about, replacing the caulk in there. But I started, it's funny, this ties into conjunction since I've been getting more and more comfortable with the Neptune Apexes. And I have more and more now. Now, the thing is, it makes you look at a data point and go, oh, I want to make that data point better. And obviously I know, the way I'm approaching trying to keep the pH up on several clients' tanks is what I guess I feel where hobbyists should concentrate more on. I just want the number elevated. I'm not trying to peg it at some certain number. I just
Yeah.
want it up. And I don't even freak out when it's not up. I don't do drastic changes or anything. But I have noticed since I've, have more apexes on client systems now, and I can just wake up at 2 in the morning and look at the graphs and man, Bates's pH is tanking. What do I need to do to make it not be? So, and I don't freak out. I don't drip sodium hydroxide. I don't do anything drastic, but I have been able to bring these pHs up. And this is not a shock or a surprise, but you do see, when it's these 6 tanks that I have an apex on versus the other ones. When you concentrate a little more on at least elevating the pH, you see more polyp extension. I'm seeing seems like faster growth, all sorts of stuff. Now I don't
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
I'm just saying I don't freak out about what the number should be. I just generally, and I'm also in the backpack I carry for maintenance. I have a chock full of big bag of the 7.0 and 10.0, the little packets, because I make sure and I make notes in Neptune. Like I try to calibrate them at least once every 6 months, or at least bust open a 10 and throw it in there while I'm doing something else and come back and look, oh yeah, it says 10.02. Like that's good. I don't need
Close
to do
enough.
anything. I'm just
Yeah,
checking
yeah.
them.
Oh,
I'm
that's a
just
good
making
idea.
sure. Yeah.
That's a good idea.
And the packets are cheap as hell. So
Yeah, and you can also buy it, you can buy a bottle of it instead of the sachets.
yeah.
If you if you want to feel like you are not wasting more plastic, although it's probably a wash. What
Yeah.
let me ask you, do you mind if I ask you a question?
Well, let me see.
I
Okay.
love that. Let me ask you. I'm just going to ask you.
Just ask it.
What do you mean when you say elevated? Because if you're not really paying attention to the number, I'm sure people want to know what the hell you're talking about.
That's true. So it's funny because doing this so long, like I have great looking tanks that will tell me that it's like 7.8, 7.9. And you're like, that's a pretty crappy pH. Tank still looks great. Tank still looks better than a lot of tanks that I see, so it's like, do you really need to freak out? But then, so I tell myself in my head, I don't want anything like 8.5 or higher. And I'd really rather it not dip below 8,
Yeah.
7.9, not a big deal, but I'm just getting to 7.8. I feel like I'm like, all right, what's going on here? Is the tank wrapped up in a cabinet and there's not enough circulation? Like, what is going on? Are there too many people in the room? Like, what's the story with this tank?
So if you've got one that's like 7.8 and it looks good, do you still try to elevate that pH?
I try to think of things slowly, not at the moment. Again, saying like not drastic. Oh, 7.8. I better do this. I better do that. No, it's just critically thinking about how stuff's set up. Do I need to make the skimmer draw from outside of the stand? Do I need to think about putting a CO2 scrubber on it? One of them was a 600 gallon, and I put the K2 Avast marine Kalkwasser reactor on it. I just asked the client who knows nothing about aquariums, is it okay if I puts this piece of equipment on there? Okay, cool. What does it do? It just elevates this thing called pH. And he's like, sure, it doesn't cost that much. So go ahead. So I did it. And then several weeks later, the client said, hey, the corals are looking better. And he calls them fuzzy things, polyps. He's like, they look fuzzier and all that, and this whole time I'm looking at the chart. I almost wanted to do that just so I could hear if he would notice anything or not.
What was the number pre and what was the number post?
It was sitting around 7.9 or 8. And I had a brand new Neptune Apex on it with the brand new calibrated double junction probe. And so I was watching it like that. And then I convinced him of that. Now it's anywhere from 8.3, maybe the high 8.2s to right under 8.5.
Yeah, I would assume that would make a difference.
Yeah.
From going up 7.9 to 8.3.
Yeah.
Yeah. Your corals
not
are
a point
happier.
or something like that, but several points. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's great. And when we talk, there's a couple things that I can think of. If you're gonna go and put a pH device or any device on your aquarium that's supposed to do something, and you don't keep up on what that device needs to do what it does, of course it's not going to help you.
Mm.
You know, it's not magic. There's no magic thing you can put on that just you never have to do anything to. Except maybe a big air pump that's outside that pumps into your sump, right?
Yeah.
So definitely do that. And because people say about, I mean, definitely keep up on whatever you do. If you put a caulk stirrer on your tank, make sure it's got caulk in it and it's dosing properly. Um, and then, you know, is the juice worth the squeeze is always the question. And I think a lot of going crazy to do something about your pH isn't worth the squeeze, because you start not having fun and you start chasing esoteric devices. And, you know, if you're lazy already, you know, having to change out your, um, you know, your CO2 absorbent media, if you've gone that route to raise your pH, you know, you're not going to do it. And, you know, if you have to, you know, if you have an ozone reactor, an ozonator, and you have an air dryer that you have to keep, you know, heating up again so it will absorb more moisture, and you don't like doing that,
You got to
don't
do it.
don't do it. You know, you know, the tank was probably fine at 7.9. It's just a little more fine
Yeah.
now at 8.4 or 8.3. So, you know, go for it, but don't go crazy about it. You know, that ties in. Oh, I'm sorry, anything else specific on that tank or that topic
No, that's
of
about
pH?
it. The crazy thing was, I mean, it's not crazy at all. I just shouldn't have said that, but like I'm starting to see little dots of core come more aggressively too. And this isn't some epiphany, bro. I've been using caulk washer since 1995.
Right.
And I've been using it continuously since 1995. It's just I'm just now that I can see the data on the pH, and then I was being more aggressive about replacing the caulk washer more frequently, and then it just seems good.
That's great. You know, more data that you trust can guide you, which is why all of these things make a lot of sense, to add the automation and the monitoring. There's nothing wrong with that. Although, if you do it before you're ready, it will make you insane. I mean, you and I have kind of the same path to controllers and monitoring. You know, in 2014 or whatever, I started doing it simply to turn my metal halides off when it got too hot.
Yeah.
And then as I played with it more over a couple of years, you know, I started putting more on it and trusting it more and seeing what it could do and how it made my life easier, while at the same time making my life harder because I had to understand the control equipment. But if you take a couple of years or whatever to learn that, you get all that
Well,
experience. And, you know, so like I know if my salinity goes crazy or if the Trident borks and gives me weird readings, you know, don't freak out. There's, you know, it's not God watching your tank and telling you something's wrong. It's, you need to know the foibles of the equipment. And it sounds like over the last 3 or 4 years, you've had the same thing, slowly coming on to more apexes and understanding, you know, how they help you do your job and watch the tanks. I think it's
and
phenomenal.
honestly, quick shout out to Todd Krunkle at Champion Lighting and Supply, because he's been a good resource for me. A little bit of hand holding with the apexes, and it's funny, like any other piece of equipment, the more knowledge I gain of them, and hey Todd, how do you do this? Oh, boom boom boom, okay. And now I look back at the old me and like who was using it as a fancy timer at some point. It's like,
Right.
oh come on man, it wasn't that hard. You just had to
Right. You
rough
just
it
had,
up a little bit.
yeah, but it was hard because you have to bend your mind around it. It isn't nothing to get a controller. You know, the idea of switching ecosystems for me, you know, whether it be on my computer or, you know, from the Apex, it's like I have to learn a whole new language. And that's daunting if you want results quickly.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah. And so yeah, having a Todd or, you know, I think people ask questions in the Discord is great.
Mhm.
If you know where to look online for answers, but you also need to know, you know, kind of a baseline understanding of what you're doing before you can ask those questions. I remember getting really grumpy that there wasn't a really good resource for, at the time, that didn't seem to be a really good resource for coding on the Apex. And the truth was, there were fine resources. I just didn't know what questions to ask to be able to find out the answers.
But see, that kind of goes with the Dunning-Kruger, and it's embarrassing then when we have social media and you go on there like, I hate Neptune, they don't make it, blah, blah, blah. And then someone's like, here you go, dude, it's right here. And you're like, oh, well, I sort of look like a jackass.
Well, yeah. So first of all, social media is horrible. Stay away from social media. That's why I like our Discord. The Discord is small enough.
It's a community.
It still has some room to grow, but no one on there goes, you're an idiot, and nobody comes on and goes, fucking, this piece of equipment doesn't work, this is bullshit. People going, hey, I'm having an issue.
Well, because they're comfortable.
Yeah. Can you help me? And so it's not a fight. It's like, yeah, I want to help you. So that's great. Find somebody who knows what's going on and be able to ask them. And then also understand, when I was getting mad that there wasn't a resource, it was like me being mad that I don't play bass well enough. Aaron was, our friend Aaron, who's been on the show a couple of times. I was talking to Aaron and he said, we were talking about bass because he's a bassist, although his hands are all crazy now. I don't know what this means. He's got some hand pain now. But I was talking about being better. Why I want to be better. And he goes, well, what do you mean? And I talked about what I do. And he goes, oh, you're just lazy. That's why you're not better. And it's like, practice. Oh yeah, I can look at all the videos I want online, but unless I sit down and work with the bass, I'm not going to get better. And it's the same thing with the Apex or any piece of equipment on your tank.
Mess with it.
You got to play with it to figure it out.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious.
Champion, champion. Lighting and supply, the place to go for your champions and your lighting and supply.
Champion Lighting and Supply is like the Reef Beef, the Reef Beef podcast of aquarium stores. It's the right size for the right people selling the right stuff. And Todd is like a hobbyist. He's in it for the right reason. And my favorite thing about Champion Lighting is that they pack their stuff with recycled cardboard, which makes me so happy. What's yours, Ben? I know you got something.
I have two little Haloclona blue sponges, and I told Todd, I was like, I'm not sure what to feed him, and he recommended this.
Which one is it? Oh, that's the Fido?
Yeah, but it's the tiny, the picoplankton.
Yeah.
0.2 to 2 micro whatevers. But anyways, this is cool. So I'm going to try to see, it'll be a long-term thing. I'm going to try to see if I can make my Haloclonas grow bigger or get rid of these squirrel fingers.
So check them out, Champion Lighting and Supply, and tell them Rich and Ben sent you, and they'll probably put something insane in your package when they send it to you.
Yeah.
Champion Lighting and Supply, link down below.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious.
Now that leads, I think, really nicely into the first topic that we're going to do first. Jared and Scott both asked us on the Discord, do we make things harder than they are? And how do we recognize that? And I'll let you talk because I've been babbling. So what do you think?
That's near and dear to my heart because as someone who does it for a living, every day I either see people online or whatever, and it's like, you're making this harder than it needs to be. It's still an endeavor, quite an endeavor, but and how am I equating that? It's just part of that is when someone doesn't have a whole lot of wisdom or experience in the industry and they're tilting at all the windmills that they see online. People are messing with pH. People are talking about lanthanum chloride. People are doing this and experimenting with that. You're a baby in the woods. You go back to that one episode that we had called Shut Up, Baby. It's just like, master the basics, man, because that other stuff, we had a show where I equated it to, you're a runner and you're like, well, what's the difference between me and an Olympic level runner? It's not, if you're an accomplished runner, it's not the big basic things. Y'all all have the basics down, but they're doing the basics better. And then they start plugging in those 0.5% things, over and over. And that's how they've edged out to where they're Olympic caliber type running. So
And
go
they've
ahead.
also trained for 20 years
Yeah.
at running. They also cross-train for 4 hours a day. Then
Genetics.
then they train for 4 hours a day,
Yeah.
and then they have people who are coaching them. So it's
Yeah.
not like they just picked it up. It's, you know, the 10,000 hours thing.
Yeah. Well, in that case, it's literally their job to run. So you're not gonna,
Right.
unless
And
you quit your job.
they have a whole support staff.
Yeah.
Now, learning, you always make things harder than they are when you're learning, I think.
Oh, totally.
Always. And you're always looking for something outside of you that will give you an advantage. You know, that's why you buy all, you know, how many, I got boxes of crap that I'm never going to look at again, yet somehow I keep them.
I do the same.
You know, I've got expired test kits and two bottles of Prime I saw the other day. It's like, why do I have 2 bottles of Prime?
Oh, Prime's good. I use
So,
Prime a lot.
While you're, well, I that's not how I'm set up. I use it for the pond sometimes. So
Yeah.
But then I've also got boxes of, you know, other stuff outside, the house stuff, that I'm thrilled because they're moldy now, so I can throw them away. It's like, you know, that shit's been sitting there for
I get it.
2
You're like, maybe
years.
I'll use that someday. Okay, now it's covered in mold, and now I can, like, with a clear conscience, throw it in the trash.
Right. So I want to get rid of all that. You know,
I think the hard thing with this hobby is patience. Impatience makes you make it harder than it is, because like I have this client that he's one of my few clients that knows a little bit about being a hobbyist, and we sort of go in together. He's far from accomplished, but you know, it's a fun thing. But his impatience is just makes me want to climb up the wall, because like, how do we get this? I saw the picture of this, and how do we get to that? And it's like, dude, you could be the best hobbyist on the planet, and it's still time. You're not going to force any of this stuff.
right. You know, it's just like any other hobby. You are not going to be good at your musical instrument unless you spend the time to get good at your musical instrument.
Yeah, I bought a guitar 2 weeks later. I can't play Joe Satriani. This sucks. Guitar sucks. Fuck all this.
Right. No,
Like,
that's
calm
not,
down.
and this is living stuff. It takes time. And we necessarily make it more complicated because that's part of the learning process. I remember my first fish store job. You know, I had tanks for 3 or 4 or 5 years before it, but the first job really got me into more testing. And I remember testing pH, and you know, it's testing every day, testing in the morning and the night, you know, and you know, so
And
yeah,
titration, where it's hard to I
it was
can't,
the
I'm not colorblind. I
remember,
can't do it either.
it was the ones where you put the powder in and you shook it and it had the,
Oh, is that the one that had the plastic scale,
yeah,
colored scale that said,
yeah.
yeah,
I want to say it was
Aquatronics?
C-Chem or
I want to say Aquatronics.
C-Test. I think there were several by the time I got done in the 80s with them. But the point is, you go down the rabbit hole of testing and understanding what pH does, and you buy all kinds of stuff, and then you get a feel for how the tests work, and you get a feel for what your pH does, and then you kind of stop testing that often because you know now it doesn't matter. But you had to go through all that to understand.
Oh, for sure.
That's what part of the you know, when the Trident came out with the automatic alkalinity testing, I was so excited to tie that to my calcium reactor and have it control it. And it was really interesting for a while to watch what the alk did over the course of a day, and then be able to adjust things to make it kind of run smoother. Now you know, I just let it do its thing because it kind of works.
Yeah.
But that gave me a much better understanding of what pH was doing. You know, the daily potassium tester I have, which I don't know if I'll ever be able to get reagents for it again.
I know what you're talking about.
It's interesting to see what it's doing every day, but what it's really doing is what I thought it was doing anyway. So I'm kind of confirmed with it.
Yeah.
So, you know, if I don't get reagents, I just have less data, and, you know, that's okay too. And everything is like that. When you get lights, you know, oh, you better get a par meter and you better, you know, do a par map of your whole tank. So, you know, and it's like, it's great that everyone does that themselves because you need to do it yourself really to learn. But the truth about that is you can look at any of the people who have done a par map of their tank and kind of understand what's going on with the par in your tank because
Well,
that's how it works.
here's another thing. I've seen people that make a par map of their tank fucking sucks. What did it get you? Like that's one of the things where I think we make it harder than it needs to be, because I think it is cool to rent a par meter and see what you got. But I've had clients before ask me like, oh, it was reading 200 here. What should it read? They ain't no magic number.
Yeah.
The coral changes its physiology, you know?
What should it read there? What do you want it to read there? There's no should. It's par. It's your tank. Things are.
Or if you made it 250, bam, that coral's awesome. Hey, that doesn't happen.
Doesn't work like that. And you know, everyone running, people still do it. You know, the idea that, you know, some people are still talking about like metal halide's the best. And it's like, it's not. There is not a smoking gun of magic bullets out there that's going to make your tank better. It's tiny little tweaks as you get better at keeping your tank that will allow it to get better. There's no magic piece of device. There, you know, there may be a light that you like better and have better results with, but that's for you. It's like, we'll go back to musical instruments again. You know, oh, do I use round wound strings or flat round strings? I'm not good enough to care. I'm not good enough to
play with it. Find out what you like. Maybe
you know,
it makes a different sound or a different feel.
You know, do I need an effects pedal with 150 effects? I'm not good enough to care about 150 effects. Who cares? Someone who's really good or who knows what they're doing, they have a reason for using that, you know. I understand the idea too about, you know, it's funny that lighting has come around again. Now people are saying, you know, I'm tired of all these choices that I have with the spectrum control on my lights. I just want it to be simple. Yeah. Having too many choices makes somebody who's newer to the hobby work harder than they need to be working, because they're trying to, you know, tweak in, oh, you know, should I have a sunrise? How fast and how long should it be? It doesn't really.
Should I minimize the green? Do I need to have it all the way up?
Yeah.
You can just get wrapped around the wheel of so many facets in this hobby.
The other thing that's funny about that one is people are like, I wish it was simple. It's like, it really can be simple. Set everything to 100% and you're done. You don't have to use all the choices, you know? So yeah, so how do you recognize it? That you've made it harder than it needs to be?
Your anxiety level.
Yeah. Your anxiety level. If
the hobby's not being fun to you, you might just need to chill a little bit.
Yeah. Or you could flip the switch in your head and go, what am I actually trying to accomplish with what I'm doing here? You know, why has this become so complicated? Well, it's because you're learning. You know, when you go to college or you go to, you know, you take any kind of class, you do make things more complicated than it needs to be. But I think it only feels complicated because you don't know what you're doing.
And then you always 10 years later, you look back and you're like, foolish.
Yeah. I've talked with a few people lately about flow. And, you know, the couple of hints I give about flow, which is you want to make the whole body of water move. Random flow's good part of the day, but you want laminar flow one way and laminar flow the other way. And you have to give the water time to get momentum.
Yeah.
Right. Those few things you can't learn unless somebody tells you, but you still don't know what I mean until you go and try that stuff and see what it works. And nobody wants to dick around with their tank for some reason, because it's like, oh, move your pumps here and sit down, have some bubbles or some food in there that you could drop in and see what happens. You know, stretch it. If you think, you know, 10 seconds, it's probably not enough. Make it 20, make it a minute. see what that does and spend some time learning. I guess
Well, yeah,
that's
like
the
on the
answer.
circulation, I think like let's say you have a 10-foot long tank and you have like an MP60 on each side. I would say turn the main pump, your return pump off, and isolate one pump, and then turn it on to where you want it to be. See, put food or whatever you want to do in there, watch detritus, and see how long it takes that pump at what percentage to affect the other side. Because
Yeah.
this like pulse for 2 seconds, like the water went that far.
Right. And then petered out because it's got nothing pushing.
Yeah.
I've spent hours and 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 hours messing with flow, both here and like at public aquariums when, trying to understand it. It's not an easy thing to wrap your mind around. And every tank is different with the flow.
Mhm.
So we're back to the thing we were talking about earlier, maybe. Make the process fun. Process, not product. Process, not product. And, learning how to make waves, the J-bow pump, I think the way their controllers work, they're the best thing I can find for making waves. They just really, they turn fast enough and they change fast enough and they move water in a way that really allows for a bounce to have happen.
I used to make fun of J-Bow, and I challenge anyone. I got several of them from Todd at Champion Line Supply. They're still running. Guess what? I haven't even cleaned them. They're running perfectly fine. They're cheap, and you get one of those bigger ones. They have a puck one too, almost like a Nero.
Yeah.
And I don't know what they do with it, but you can cause a standing wave easily with one.
It's how they control the pump.
Yeah.
I have one of those puck ones. It binds up on me sometimes. I'm not sure what's going on with it yet, but it's cheap. And I get in there and I spin it and it comes back on. So
Yeah.
God, I still every time I think about when people were saying, J-Bow's a piece of crap, don't get it. If you have to replace it every 2 years. And it was like, well, it costs a quarter of what more expensive pump works.
$40 or something.
So it's like, oh, well, if I have to replace it every 2 years, who cares?
Well, and also Hyundai used to suck. Honda used to
Yeah.
suck. Toyota used to suck.
Yeah. And in 2 years, there's going to be probably something you
Yeah.
want to try differently anyway.
Yep.
The J-Bow now has like a half gyre. Instead of 2 barrels, it's got 1 barrel.
Yeah.
And I'm going to put one in one side of my tank because I'm an idiot and I want different flow everywhere.
Oh yeah.
And I'll let you know how that goes. But yeah, if you want to know about flow, you got to put some time in to mess around with flow in your tank. I had one more thing. Oh, additives. You've got to, of course you make it more complicated. And then people, do you get a dosing pump and how often do you add and what time do you add and where do you add? And, there's all these questions that are questions, but they're not necessarily life and death questions. But you got to learn them. And like, I think people go crazy with food. I think people go too crazy with food. I think our prepared foods now are really good. This isn't 1981 anymore, where most foods are just blood meal or whatever the hell.
Or you just have. I remember back in the days when you're talking about frozen food, you just had Formula 1, Formula 2, and brine shrimp. That was it.
Right. So I think our foods are really good, and people talk about some folks who recommend doing a whole lot of work to feed their tanks. And they talk about, how great are those fish? Look how good they are. And here's, man, you have to take the blinders off. The communities you are in are not everything, right? So if you're in one community, you better make sure. I mean, I love this about the Discord is because people are active and paying attention in other places as well.
Yeah.
And then they bring it back. And so we kind of got a think tank kind of thing going on. You get all kinds of information. But, that person who is saying, I have these great fat and happy fish and it only takes me 4 hours to feed everything a day. The question is, do other people also have fat, happy fish that are not doing 4 hours a day worth of work for their food?
Yeah.
And the answer is yes. And so you got, if you enjoy taking 4 hours a day, and you put, 3, then you dice up everything and a little bit of larval, whatever. And,
You
that,
pipette to this blastomusa and you,
that's great. That's great. I'm just talking about prepping the food and what kind of food, that's great. Do it because you enjoy it. But
yeah.
if you're going
But
to
it's
say
not
that,
necessary.
if it doesn't make a difference, you got to look for outside of the cherry picking you've done. There's other people out there who are having, and this is that's a whole thing with the whole hobby, right? It's every time somebody says, this is what I'm doing for success. It's like, well, here's 10 people who are not doing that, who are having just the same amount of success. I'm not saying don't do what they're doing. That's a great place to start. And they have something that you can learn from them, but they haven't found a secret. They found a way that works for them.
The whole time I've been in this industry, it seems like everyone's chasing what's the right way to do X. And I'm just telling you, after 30 years, ain't nobody found the X.
Ain't nobody found the X, and it's coming back around. I made the joke the other day. That's why blood meal's on my head and Mark Wise products. There's some people doing what they're calling a concoction feeding, which is almost what I do. I got a whole lot of food. I just mix it together and feed it,
Yeah.
but they're like cooking the food and letting bacteria grow in it. And,
oh, I saw that. There's people fermenting.
Yeah, maybe there's something to it, but I certainly wouldn't do that unless you had a lot of experience, because you work really hard to QT your stuff and make sure your system is clean and that you don't introduce anything you don't want. And now you're growing stuff in an incubator that you don't know what is in there, and you're hoping it's,
when you could be bringing up pathogenic bacteria.
Sure. Now, could it lead to something? Sure, maybe. But boy, oh boy, don't make it more complicated than it needs to be. And, the people who wanting to be on the bleeding edge of that stuff, let them be on the bleeding edge and see what happens.
Them. Yeah, watch them.
We've seen so many bleeding edge things come and go that who cares?
That's hilarious. That's hilarious.
PolypLab. PolypLab. We are powered by them.
We are powered by them. PolypLab, Phil, they're really great. The thing I want to tell you about this week is Reef Roids. Reef Roids is one of my go-to foods for my baby corals, which are back there, are still growing, and for spawning. So it's one of the major elements of the stew that I feed to my different animals here. I like it. It's small. It's the right size. Things seem to react to it when you put it in the water. The other thing I'm liking so much from PolypLab is the Genesis block. I'm going to send somebody in our Discord. Adam actually wants one. I'm going to take one from my sump that's been cooking in there for a long time. And it's got some sponges on it. And the thing I like about it so much is it doesn't have big nooks and crannies. So lots of terrible things can't hide in there. Really just sending bacteria to Adam for him to add to his system. So we will see how that goes and how much he loves it and how much he doesn't love it. But it should work really well. Power yourself with PolypLab.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious.
I have one more note here about this, which was nori. You see people.
Oh, you and me are going to fight on that.
People who say nori is the most, you have to feed nori to tangs, right?
I don't know if I say have to. I feel like it keeps their aggression down and keeps their bellies full.
I don't keep 1,000 tangs together, so I don't care.
Yeah.
I have one tang in a tank because
he doesn't care. Yeah.
I don't want to deal with the aggression. I mean, if you're feeding food, so people don't excuse me. People, when I see people talk about nori, they're not talking about aggression. If it's aggression, if you have food available all the time that takes their attention and makes the fish deal with that food, then yeah, that can help with aggression issues. But that's not what people seem to think. People think they need to feed nori because tangs need algae. It's like, well, first of all, tangs don't eat nori, so be careful. They just don't, right? And there are plenty of people who don't feed nori to their tanks, who have tangs that are super healthy.
Yeah.
So, is it necessary? No, don't make it more complicated than it is, And you want to talk about making things more complicated, the trace element dosing.
Oh,
I was reading something about fluorine, and it's like, man, I really need to see some data that shows what kind of juices you're getting out of the squeeze, and how how much was fluorine the only thing changed in the tank to affect those, um to give you the response that you think you're seeing. That's a really hard thing to show. I think that's all I got on this. I think I'm killing it to death.
no, but
Take us home.
the fluorine thing dovetails with you and Sanjay Joshi wrote an article on ICP analysis.
We did. Did you read it?
I did. As a matter of fact, I read it like 10 times because I am not the sharpest knife in the drawer, and it can take me a little while. And a lot of those concepts were new to me, the ANOVA and all these other things. And yeah, I'd read through a paragraph and I'd be like, what? And I would just go back and reread it because it's some people aren't gonna find it so, but for me it was heavy reading, and so I had to go through it. But okay, let me just tell you my gist of it. It felt like in the article, you guys, what you found and what you're saying, what your conclusions are, that they did like triple blind, tried 3 different ICP companies and send in like certified samples, and okay, you're shaking your head.
Yeah.
No, I got that wrong.
Let me
Do it.
I'm going to say what we did,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
that's easier, and then I'm totally interested to hear what you took away from it.
Okay.
It's published on our friends the Reef Builder site. It's called Evaluating the Repeatability and Differences Between ICP Tests. What we did was we went to 3 ICP companies, and we don't care who they are. It's not about who they are. And we sent each one of them 5 tests of the same water, and then we compared and contrasted the results. That's what we did.
But in a highly scientific manner.
Yeah, and then we went through and did a bunch of statistics on it.
Yeah.
So that was all, and that's what we did. And then we compared the results. We wanted to do 5 ICP companies with 10 tests each, but that money gets crazy. And I got to thank Reef Beef for sponsoring the study, and a bunch of beefers helped out. And I got to thank all of them. They're thanked in the article. And Chris Maupin helped out and read it, and Jim Welch did. And so we're really happy with it. And we also didn't feel the need to do more replicates, because we felt pretty strongly that that we kind of knew what was going on, and kind of knew where it was, how it was going to end up. But before I say anything else, I'd like to hear what you took away from that.
I think the main gist, and I can make it simple, was that like the larger, the macro elements were pretty repeatable and on the money between the companies. But I felt like what the article was getting at is when you start getting into these trace elements and stuff, that no one's giving a margin of error, and these things like moonshine, where they're trying to nail their amount of vanadium or the rubidium. And it's like these ICP companies are not able to give you this accuracy that you think you have. So I felt like the article is like saying, fine, calcium ions and this, but when you get down to these weird little trace things, it's a fool's.
I think that's pretty good. We tried to design the article so that the body of the article, it's a paper really, was very scientific, and we explained what we were doing and why, and what processes we went through, and how we massaged the data, not massage, how we examined the data really. And then we wrote the conclusion to be really all you needed to know. Here's the answers. Here's what we think. And
TLDR.
Yeah, exactly. I almost called it that. And for some reason we decided not to do that. But the takeaway seems to be, for me, and by the way, if you're listening to this or watching this, please let us know what you think about the article down below. Let us know what you think about making things harder than we think they're supposed to be. You know, let us know. Let us know.
And while you're at it, give us the stars and the ratings, please.
Sure. And then come to our house and give us real massages.
Rub our feet.
So the ICP results across the same vendor with the same water across different vendors are not necessarily as precise and as accurate as many people think they are. I mean, but we've known that since Chris and I wrote that article in 2014. It's pretty much the same conclusion. And I went and I looked at a couple of other people are doing really great work in this area. And I was reading what they were saying, and they all kind of come to the same conclusions, which is, yeah, it's pretty good. But, you know, as you get down to the smaller elements, it's harder and harder to know how precise this is going to be and how accurate it is.
Well, like if you got an ICP result and you're trying to, I don't know why you would, but people are out there doing it. You were trying to get your level of rubidium correct. But the problem is the testing does not have the margin of error. And what comes back to you as low rubidium, if they would say what the margin of error is, your rubidium could be fine. And then my problem is too, like, who even says that rubidium is all that important for things?
Right. So there's the two parts of that are, number one, what is your margin of error for that element? Right. And if it's 5%, that's great. Right. If it's 20%, that's not so great. You've got to watch that slop. And you can't micro adjust in there because you've got a 20% margin of error for that result. And the second part is, what is this target number that you're looking for? Each of the ICP companies seems to have a different target number. There is no consensus about what the right number is. You kind of look at what natural seawater does. That's a good guide. But we dick around with stuff outside of natural seawater numbers all the time, and we don't have a problem with it. And then I think the one of the other takeaways is that for the macro elements, for things like calcium, right? Things that there's a lot of it in the water, we have a feel for. So if you get a calcium number back at 420 ppm, you know it's probably between 400 and 450. And we know through all the experience of all of us monkeys playing with this for a long time that anywhere in there is fine. Really, 380 to 500 is probably fine.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in fact, we know this so much that if people go, you know, my calcium is 420, I want it to be 430. What should I do? People go, something else.
Yeah.
You know? Or add a tiny bit more. It's just, this is a silly thing to be chasing, right?
Yeah.
We know about pH, where pH is not in this thing. So, we know what's going on with the macro elements, and that the ICP tests seem to be better the more of an element is in the sample. There's a lot of calcium, right? Something that there's a little bit of, the test is more squinty. The margin of error goes up.
Mm-hmm.
So you just got to pay attention to that. And, you know, if you got a 20% margin of error on some element, and a write-up gives some feel for what that is like across different tests and across the same test, you know, you might, if you're trying to raise it 0.05 and your margin of error is 0.20, you're not really doing anything to raise it 0.05. It just doesn't work that way. You don't have the accuracy and precision to know what that is. So be careful. And you're going to have to decide this for yourself, because everybody has a different idea of what those numbers should be, right? And just like measuring your alkalinity on a Trident and then looking at it with a titration test of your own, you get different numbers. You get different numbers from different ICP companies. And we, and we're not sure. I got to see if I can figure this out. I don't know if they were, what different days they were run on. ICP could be different on a different day. You
We
could
know
get a
what
different result.
would be tricky if someone was like, 1 month they're like, oh, I got a good deal on this packet from ICPA company, and like then you go a couple months down the road, it's like, oh, and then I saw a sale on this thing from ICPB, I'm gonna use them, and they're like, oh no, like if you're gonna, I feel like I'm not big on ICP myself. I'm not saying screw ICP analysis, but I'm just saying it doesn't factor into what I do. But if I was going to habitually use it, I would only use from one company.
Absolutely. That's a really good takeaway, I think. When you change companies, you've changed everything. And you have no idea how close the two companies are doing. You also sometimes don't know what they're doing. Some companies, this frustrated me. I sent in something that was supposed to be ICP OES, and they tested it as MS. And it's like that really does nothing for me.
Yeah.
Because that's not what I was expecting. And just you company telling me that it's better doesn't tell me anything. So, squint at stuff, decide for yourself what you need to be, or find somebody you trust. If you want to follow moonshiners and do what they do, go for it. Like we've talked about a million times, I don't necessarily think it's anything about the magic sauce of what's actually happening. I think it's the magic sauce of you actually paying attention
to your core
and keeping things stable, right?
Yeah.
It's the anti-Lars. It's like, people going on diets. When you go on a diet by yourself, it's harder. When you go on a diet with a group and you talk to each other every day about the diet, you do better on the diet. It doesn't necessarily mean that that particular diet is better than any other diet. It's just you paid more attention to it.
Yeah.
So, I'm fine with it. I just don't like the jump to this is the magic way. This is the magic way. Maybe that's the name of this episode. The magic way to do anything.
The magic way. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that, and that, everyone knows how cynical I am about company marketing. But that's what, if you're a company, you want to provide the magical way to get things done.
Well, if you're a company, you want to say you're providing the magical way to get things
done.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Like we have the way to do it. Those other people are doing it wrong. You do this.
It's fascinating.
They did this. Yeah.
It's fascinating. So don't.
And then you get it and it didn't work. And like, but you didn't do this. Yeah, but I did this. Yeah, but your index finger was off. And it's like, come on.
Right.
It's that hard to duplicate your magic way. No, thank you.
Yeah. That's what made me crazy about algae turf scrubbers back in 2015 when I was playing with them. Somebody insisted that they send me one. I did everything they said they did. They were like, your phosphate will come down. Did everything they said they did. And then it didn't come down, and they're like, oh, we'll do it this way then. And it's like, I'm not your lab rat. I don't know what I did what you said and it didn't work. And now you're telling me to do it a different way. So it didn't work. So put that in your advertising now.
But in the beginning, they could have said, put this ATS on your tank. It will lower phosphates, but iron could become a limiting factor. So make sure you supplement iron in the blood. And so all that information up front. But the way they did it to you makes me feel like they were like using you as a case study.
Yeah, maybe.
To figure out what their thing does.
Maybe. Like we were talking earlier, the if you look at a tank that's got ATS and it's going really well, you go, oh, I should use an ATS. Take a little time, look around for tanks that are not using ATS and see if any of those are really good too, because they are. All that said, I'm considering putting an ATS on my system.
No.
I am. Mostly because I think I figured out a place to put it that will make it easy for me to service it.
Oh, okay. And that's, man, and we don't have to make a whole subject about it, but as a service provider, the way you install things, so important, because if you make it, like if I did a carbon scrubber, CO2 scrubber on a skimmer and threw it in the back of the filtration, and then every time I had to service it on this and something gets knocked loose, like you got to make stuff easy to service.
That's a really good point. Somebody was talking about I think it was Francois was talking about putting, he's got a basement sump. This person has a basement sump, and they were like, do I have to put it on the floor? And everyone in the Discord was like, no, put it up high so you don't have to bend over to jerk with it. It
Yeah.
just makes it easier. And now that I'm saying that out loud, this crazy ideas I have for an extra tank, I could put everything that needs to be serviced not under the house anymore.
Yeah.
I could put it right at chest level.
Yeah.
And then things would be a lot easier, right?
Yeah.
The crawl space for me made a lot of sense. Now, as I'm getting older and getting tired of crawling around on my knees, I don't want to do it. Like originally that 180 gallon sump that I have was supposed to be to grow frags.
Yeah.
And within 2 months, it was like, I am not crawling around under here to grow frags. And then it just became a giant sump. So yeah, don't make things harder than they make, things as easy as possible.
Yeah. Richard, you had something about webcams, and I only have one client that has it on there. I really need to pick up the pace with that. But
this is an easy one that seems like a no-brainer to me. Put webcams everywhere for your system. Especially if you're ever not at your house. You know, webcams are super cheap now, and you can put 3 of them for like $100 or less. Put one so you can see your tank, put one so you can see the top of the tank, put 1 or 2 so you can see your sump from different views. I've had in my crawl space a pan tilt zoom camera forever.
Yeah.
And that has saved my butt several times because I can go, what's going on? And I can look at the different things going on underneath my house and see if I need to do something real quick. Or, you know, oh, wow, this says that my sump level is low. Is that true?
Yeah.
And then go look at
corroborating
yes, it is.
data points.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, Sanjay was talking about this when we were talking to him at Reef Stock. You know, he had a problem and he didn't know what was going on. You know, his apex said his temperature was dropping. I think it was.
Yeah.
And he threw his webcam up and he could see that his sump had no water in it.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay. Well, now I know what to do. And now I know what to tell my tank sitter to do.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's no magic here. Get a damn webcam.
Well, heck, you could even, if it was like under a dark cabinet too, because you can get a little LED strip light, some sort of light, plug it into an apex. So you could come in, turn the light on under there, and then log into the camera. And, you know, is the level where it's at? Is the thing dripping like it's supposed to? Is my tank blowing air bubbles? Like everything visual that you could think of.
You know, and most of the webcams come with infrared. So you can see it in the dark anyway. Sometimes I turn off the light on purpose when I'm looking at the webcam because I can see different things better. I can see if a LED is on. I can see, sometimes I can see a water level better.
Well, that's cool.
There's a few things you can see better. So
a lot of them do that, right?
Yeah, most of them do. So there's no magic here, but consider some webcams for some peace of mind.
I want to say a quick thank you to the Humble Fish crew, because my biggest blind spot has for a long time been disease and medication. And of course, I have all this baggage in my head of over the years, like, you know, obviously I know what copper to use and how to test it, and, you know, what ick and velvet. I know all those basics, but I was always just bringing stuff in and observing. And I didn't even have like medications on hand, which is a kiss of death. But something happened to me a couple months ago where I brought in a $1,200 order and lost more than half of it to velvet. And I've done this so many times in my career, but it's funny, you space them up far enough to where you're like, it's no big deal. Then it happens again. This one just happened enough to where it's like, dude, we've got to fill in these potholes. I look at, even on our Discord, I look at the disease part and I didn't engage in it at all because I'm like, whatever. Man, I have been living in the Discord. There's someone that has done videos with Bobby from Humble Fish too, and he's in our Discord, and the disease thing is Vincent Melendez.
Vince, he's great.
He's great. Man,
because
I jumped all into this, and I was it's important to me that, like, having ADD, like if I'm not into something, you could point a gun at my head and I won't learn it. So I have to be receptive to learning it. I got to a point where I was like, let's do this. And I have been absorbing all this info. And then I'm doing pure QT or whatever you want, actual QT now. And I've been using, sort of me and another beefer, sort of leaning on Vincent a lot. Like, oh, is Prazi okay with copper? Okay, yeah. What should I use Metro blood? And just I just humble fish. The whole humble fish thing has been a vast treasure trove of information to bring me back up to speed. And I just want to say thank you to them.
Absolutely. And I think that ties into something that you and I have figured out, or I figured out, I don't know what the hell you do. That I am really liking that there are different communities that are kind to each other and cross-pollinate, right?
You got to.
There's something different that happens on Telegram's Discord than happens on our Discord. There's something different that happens on Humblefish that happens on our Discord. And what I'm liking is that there are smaller communities. And so they're focused on different things. And, as long as we're not scared to recommend that people go other places, which is always scary because it's like, oh, I got to get more likes. And if if I mention Reef Builders, then people are going to go to Reef Builders and not come back to us, which might happen. And that's okay.
Then they would, so two things. One thing is that thing, if you love something, let it free. And if it meant to be, it'll come back. But another thing I always like that saying, because I really find it to be true, is that a rising tide lifts all boats. Like, I'm not trying to sequester. I like it that way, what you just said. These little focused social groups. And as long as we're all cool with each other, it's like, oh, these people over here know a shit ton about medicine and disease. And, to have sort of like a little representative like Vincent over in our Discord to where, and we just cross pollinate. We don't want to get into group think or any of this other stuff. Like,
yeah, the bigger a community gets, the harder it is to pull signal from the noise. Right. And that's the problem, I think, and my dissatisfaction with big forums. And boy, oh boy, I saw a thread the other day about somebody's CO2 reactor was leaking. And if I was this person who asked this initial question, I would kill myself. Don't kill yourself over anything. If you have anything like that, on our Discord, we have a brain health channel. Let me know if you want to be on that. We will talk to you about whatever's going on in your life and try to help you out and listen to you. Not even try to help you, mostly just be there to hear you. Right.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You can't say kill.
Too many people actually kill themselves for my liking. Join that. But what were we even talking about?
The CO2 reactor leaking. The people jumping on them and then people arguing and then
but it was every single possibility and nobody with any actual authority who knew what they were talking about.
Oh, that's forums.
So it's like, do you put this poor person, should this person put tape on their freaking
it's like put Teflon on the threads. No, don't put Teflon on the threads. There's a built-in O-ring that does it. Oh, do this. Oh, do that. You called my mama this. Hey, what? And, the original question is like, that's typical form.
Take the nylon O-ring out and put a rubber one in. Oh, put the nylon one, take the rubber one out. Tape it. Use pipe dope. It's just like, wow.
Yeah.
Tighten it. Don't only hand tighten it. Don't crank it down. It was like, this poor person.
Hand tighten it and then quarter turn. And it's like, who here knows what they're talking about?
Yeah. So we're back to that thing. If you don't know what you're talking about, say it right away going, I don't know what I'm talking about, but I've read.
Yeah. Right? I'll say it for Richard. If you don't know what you're talking about, shut the fuck up. But yeah, I think it's good if you don't feel like you're an expert to say, like, maybe say I'm not an expert on this. But I would say, like, if you have to say that part, just be quiet and be part of the people listening.
Yeah, I think what people want to do is they want to try to help, and the way people try to help is by they want to learn. And one of the ways you couple of the ways you learn is by trying to help and trying to teach. And so you're really just bouncing your own ideas off yourself. So instead of
Talking out
writing,
loud, thinking out
yeah,
loud.
and instead of typing out loud and sharing it with the world, type, wow, I'm not really sure either. I hope somebody who actually knows the answer lets us know.
Yeah.
And then you've participated in the discussion without sending it off on some direction where,
Yeah, because what you
people
don't want is pipe dope, Teflon thread, nylon, rubber, do this, hand tighten it, and anyone would be like, okay, I just quit the hobby.
Right.
How about
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. So, yeah. So we were talking about so I like the smaller communities that each have different things and cross pollinate each other. And then, people bounce around to the different communities and talk. And I think that's way stronger than trying to make one massive community where all answers are answered. I got way caught up in trying to figure out a way to do that last year. And so after thinking about it for 500 hours, like, I don't think there's a way. So yeah, anyway, Vince is great. Thank you, Vince, for helping out so many people on our Discord, and to Bobby over at Humblefish and Vince over at Humblefish for focusing on disease. They're very excited about figuring all that out. And yeah, that's where I would send anybody for the most up-to-date kind of knowledge, because Bobby updates the stickies over there. So
Yeah, I love that.
it
evolves.
Yeah, but the only way to have as it evolves, and a 20-year-old post about Brooke may give you some use, but you don't really know what's been gleaned in the last 20 years.
Yeah.
So yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I think that's good, because I am starting to love this extended community that's all over the place.
It's a better way.
I think it's a better way. I think we wrap that up. I think we're done. I think that was great. I think you're great. I love your backdrop.
Yeah, it's good. I got it from this podcast called Reef Beef.
Are you a member there? It looks like
I am. I put in the dough and the time, and I'm a member.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to not being ill and having time to actually get to things.
You're getting there, Richard. Be patient, just like with your hobby.
Just like with your hobby. And also, I figured out what was going on with my wire was dark, so Snowman will probably hate me for changing it partway through.
It did. Yeah. You are.
I've got to readjust my tanks back there, so they're
more well lit.
Everything.
So if you're watching and listening this and you'd enjoy this, please do the obvious things. Please give us some little thumbs up and some stars and whatever platform you're watching or listening to this on. Also, you can go to our website and become a member. We have tiered membership. Come to our Discord. The membership kind of plays out on there, and sort of join us if you want to join us. We're on the Discord all the time talking about all manner of stuff, and come be a beef, as we call it, a beefer.
And if you're into it, comment down below. Apparently that helps with the YouTube algorithm. Having more engagement helps us out, and share the podcast around, because that helps as well. And again, we're not trying to take over the world. We're just trying to have a nice time separating the signal from the noise and talking to like-minded reef keepers. So thank you so much. This podcast and video cast is brought to you by saltwateraquarium.com, powered by PolypLab, and supported by Champion Lighting and Supply. Thank you all for watching and listening. We'll talk to you soon. I know what's going on. I'm not going to say it while we're recording. Well, that's hilarious.
Look at the little pads. That's creepy.
It is creepy.
Fools rush in. Oh wow, you got a thumbs up.
Is that what I did? I guess I forgot to turn that off.
Oh no.
What did you do? You did that.
Woo! In a heart. You have to be watching. You can Richard and I have computers now that you make these, like you throw up gang signs and all these.
Do,
Like,
do a thumbs up. Yeah, I don't know
thumbs
what
up.
triggers it. It's your computer. I turned it off.
Oh, here it goes. Oh,
Yeah.
there it does some
There it goes.
confetti.
Yeah.
Woohoo!
Snowman's gonna freaking kill you. I
Yeah,
love
it's
it.
like, stop, man.
And I'm not gonna tell you how to turn it off because I think that's funnier.
Oh no.